Hello everyone, welcome to this session of the NPTEL course Appreciating Linguistics or Typological Approach. So, now this is about, so the third definition on the slide was about anomaly of sentences, acceptability versus unacceptability of sentences. Why in a particular language certain constructions are anomalous, certain are not. Why a few constructions are possible to be processed in the discourse, but a few others are not. So, if you can, or somebody who studies that is going to be considered as a pragmaticist, okay? Or this is what the definition of pragmatics should be if you approach it from a linguistics perspective, right? But besides that, we can also have a domain related definition for pragmatics, considering it focuses on the usage of language more than the structure or beyond the structure, besides the structure of structure of natural language. It focuses or it is concerned with the usage or the descriptive study of the language. So, that is the reason why another side of the definition story is, and what definition story? The pragmatic definition story is, pragmatics is the study of language from a functional perspective, but that is also very vague, superfluous kind of a sentence or statement. It does not really give you much information. It could be anything. So, when you say pragmatics is the study of language from a functional perspective, it could be functional, let us say morphology could be functional, phonology could be functional. So, what is so special about pragmatics, and why pragmatics should be treated as a separate discipline? And considering I just mentioned it is related to the meaning, I showed you the two pictures, and I showed that how just the picture of like a signboard, though there is a shortage of enough linguistic input, yet you got the full meaning. So, then pragmatics would be considered as just a part of semantics, but that is not true. Pragmatics has its own identity, it has its own, it is considered to be an independent discipline, right. So, if you look at that, so then you can say it's too blunt, or you can say it's too vague to define this as a study of language from a functional perspective. Of course, we agree it's going to be the study from a functional perspective, but then what exactly do you want to study? Even within the functional perspective, within the descriptive perspective, or within the descriptive framework rather, or the descriptive domain, what exactly you want to study as far as pragmatics is concerned. So, the fifth definition that we see on the slide is the best definition, I would say, or the most comprehensive definition. And what is that comprehensive definition? Let us read it out. Pragmatics is the study of those relations between language and context that are grammaticalized or encoded in the structure of a language. It sounds a little longish, but then do not worry. So, let us break it into part by part, and then you can easily understand that. So, what is this? What is it saying? Pragmatics is the study of those relations. So, the first thing, the first word that should catch your attention is relation. So, you must draw, or you must find out the relation between x and y. So, what is x and what is y? We will check it now. So, relation between language and context that are grammaticalized. Grammaticalized means it has changed into, some things have been eroded, some things have been added, or something has, like, to put it in a more broad way, I would say grammaticalized means a lot of things have changed, the metamorphosed, like there has been a metamorphosis of a particular linguistic phrase. So, the changed language and context which are encoded in the structure of a language. So, grammaticalization is one of the most important thing to understand pragmatics, and because of this grammaticalization we do see a lot of pragmatic changes, semantic changes, and these changes would eventually lead to the discussion on pragmatic typology, right, which is a baby discipline. It has not really, if you check the internet or if you try to find out the reading material, they not many things have been discussed. That does not mean that nothing has been discussed, not really, a lot of researchers are working on that. But as far as pragmatic typology is concerned, very few cross linguistic generalizations have been drawn because of the abstract nature of semantics and pragmatics together, right. Okay. So, now let us focus on the finest or the most conceptual definition of pragmatics. So, what is important? Which term do you think is important in this definition? The term grammaticalized or grammaticalization. So, what is being grammaticalized here? The language and then the context. Both has been both have been taken into account, and the context has been grammaticalized. And you are trying to see this grammaticalization, how it is encoded in the structure of a language. So, keeping grammaticalization in the focus, the pragmaticists try to understand how it has been encoded, how it has been a part of the structure of language and how to account for it. So, this encoding of structure of language as far as grammaticalization is concerned, we have to understand that when we study pragmatics. So, that is the finest and then the most conceptual definition that I could give for the moment. And this information, all of this I have got it from Levinson's book. Levinson has done a seminal work on pragmatics. Please refer to it. I think it is again a Cambridge University Press book. The author is, the title of the book is Pragmatics, and the author is Stephen C. Levinson. So, this anomalous and possible utterances, I would go back to it, but just remember these are some standard definitions that that we may consider as far as pragmatics is concerned. Okay. May I ask you to focus on this just to show that how this definition can be a faulty one. Okay. Can you let us say an example here, come there please. This is a weird construction, okay, as far as the anomaly of a particular sentence is concerned. Come here please is fine, but then you can't say come there please. To put there you have to say go there please is okay, but you can't say go here please. So, these are the anomalous or these are the impossible utterances, right. So, these impossible utterances, why they are impossible, what is so wrong about it can be decided or can be identified if you understand pragmatics well, right. The other example, let us say if I say I hereby sing what? Sing a song or something. So, grammatically also it is unacceptable, pragmatically also it is unacceptable. The other sentence that Levinson would talk about, I order you not to obey this order, right. So, when you order, that is a very interesting example actually. Look at this example 2. I order I order you not to obey this order. What do you mean by this? Do you see any connection? Do you think it does have any interpretation? First you are ordering, and you are ordering that your order should not be obeyed. So, there is a conflict, right. Grammatically it sounds correct, absolutely fine. So, there is no subject verb agreement mismatch, nothing, but when you try to interpret, so the interpretation, one is sign, the other one is interpretation. The interpretation is clumsy, confusing. It doesn't really, you are not able to conceptualize, or you are not able to understand anything, you are not going to, or you are not able to find out any meaning of this sentence, because how would it be possible? You are ordering something and you are saying not to obey your order. So, then why are you ordering, right? So, these are a couple of examples that I could bring as far as pragmatic or anomaly of a sentence is concerned in the domain of pragmatics. Or when I say the sentences are anomalous, that means these utterances are not possible in in this kind of a linguistic discourse, right. Okay. So, that is about the basic definition or the basic definitions that we might have or we should consider as far as pragmatics is concerned. Okay. So, with this information we will move to the scope of pragmatics. So, now since we understood pragmatics at least partly if not entirely, it is surely the study of language use. It is also the study of language from a functional perspective, but at the same time two most important things to remember is that it does help us to identify or to understand the anomaly of constructions or the anomaly of sentences. So, the pragmatic features or the pragmatic informations associated with the sentence should give us a clue why a particular construction is going to be anomalous or is going to be impossible. But above everything or keeping everything aside, the most important thing or the most crucial definition of pragmatics would be to study the relation between language and context that are grammaticalized. And when I say grammaticalized, here grammaticalized grammaticalize means in a broader sense that covers the encoding of meaning distinctions. Okay. So, when the meaning distinction or the meaning had changed over the period of time, that entire process or that phenomenon is known as grammaticalization. You may see that in lexicon, morphological sections, syntax and phonology of languages. So, it's to put it in a broader sense, it is going to be meaning change. So, this grammaticalization would help us to understand pragmatic typology later. So, whether it is possible for us to draw any cross linguistic generalization, I like we will discuss it later, we are not very sure, but at least the whole story of pragmatic typology revolves around grammaticalization, and that leads to the semantic change as well as the pragmatic change. So, the most conceptual or the most the sharpest definition of pragmatics would be to study the relation between language and context that are grammaticalized, or it is how it has been encoded in the structure of language. So, that takes care of both the structural aspect as well as the functional aspect. So, just by limiting it to the language use or language description or functional perspective would not do enough justice to pragmatics. So, we have to put it, or you have to use it, or you have to understand it both or by an inclusive approach of formal and functional linguistics as a discipline, right. Okay. So, how it is encoded in that grammaticalization, how it is encoded in the structure is the definition of pragmatics, right. So, now let us to take this discussion forward, how or what are the major scope of pragmatics we need to study. So, the first thing is that pragmatics would have some 5 major scopes, and when I say 5 major scopes, I have already discussed one of them in the beginning of my discussion, which is context, where the context includes both the linguistic context and then the co-text, right. So, we'll talk about it in more detail, but before that let us first list what are the let's say what are the context that which are involved in study of pragmatics. Okay. So, one would be the physical context, or the other one would be the linguistic context, right, and the linguistic context that includes the co-text, right. Okay. So, let us take the discussion forward. In let us say we know how to interpret the words on the basis of the physical context, and what is physical context? So, I have written here either linguistic or physical. Linguistic context, you know, that is about the use of phrases, words and sentences. And what are the physical context? Physical context would be in what situation this particular word has been used. Let me give you an example. Okay. Let us say bank. I am talking about the context in pragmatics. right? What is it? Bank could be a what? Homonym, right? And why bank would be considered as a homonym? Because the spelling is same, the pronunciation is same, but it has different meanings. It depends on the context. If you are using it in the context of money or to withdraw some cash, bank would mean something else. But if you want to take a walk in the evening by the riverside, bank will have a different meaning altogether, right. So, depending on the context or depending on the situation, the meaning of the words change, and that is what that's one of the most important scope of pragmatics. So, when you are trying to understand the meaning of a particular term, you have to find out which context has it being used or has it been used. So, this is the example: to withdraw cash, that's one domain. The other domain is to take a walk by the riverside. Okay. So, here scope of pragmatics is the context. One is the physical context, the other one is the linguistic context. Linguistic context is the homonym here. So, it could mean either this or that. Then which one, what decides the meaning? Does linguistic context alone decide the meaning? No, it will create a confusion. So, if you just say she is at the bank, so what does it mean? So, which bank are you talking about? So, the linguistic context is not sufficient here. You must identify what is the physical context. If she is at the bank for withdrawing cash, then it is money bank, and if she is there by the riverside just to take a walk, then it is the river bank. So, the physical context and linguistic context both are equally important when you are talking about scope of pragmatics. Is it clear? I hope it is, right. So, you need to find out what is the relevant context here and which one would help you to interpret things in a more holistic way, whether the linguistic expression or the physical context, right. If you are talking about time and place and stuff like that, spatial and temporal information, that will be physical context, and if you are talking about the phrases and words, then it is going to be linguistic context. I hope it is clear now. Fine. Now, let us move on to the next scope of pragmatics. The second thing in the category or in the domain of pragmatics or scope of pragmatics would be deixis, right. So, deixis or the deictic information, or when you are talking about if this is a very new word for you. So, these are the informations related to space, time and person. So, that would be the deixis, right. So, there are certain, let me give a very common or very simple example. There are some very common words in our language that cannot be interpreted at all if we do not know the context, and I think that holds true for all the worlds in the all the languages in the world. So, if you do not know the context, you cannot understand the meaning of it, or you cannot, maybe you can understand the meaning, but you can't interpret the exact like the exact information. It cannot be interpreted, right. So, why it cannot be interpreted? Because the meaning changes when the rest of the words in the sentence change. For example, here and there. What do you mean by here? Here would be dependent on a particular person, where she or he is standing, sitting or working or whatever. Just by simply saying here, you do not get any interpretation. What could it mean? If I am standing at the back of the classroom, that is here. If I am standing at the front, that is here, and standing in the front, if I talk about the back of the classroom, that will be there. Similarly, this there, the interpretation of this there is going to change if I move to the classroom, right, if I move to the back of the classroom. So, moving to the back of the classroom, back would be here, front would be there. If I move to the front of the classroom, front would be here and back would be there. So, what does it mean? That means just these linguistic informations or linguistic context is not enough. We have to find out some other didactic information, some other pragmatic markers or some other pragmatic information. So, words like this: here, there, this, that, now, then, yesterday, today, tomorrow. So, these are the words. They also the pronouns me, she, him, it. So, the interpretation changes depending on the situation or depending on the context that they are in. So, these are known as there are three kinds. These are the didactic markers, or these are the didactic phrases, and these didactic phrases could be either personal or spatial or temporal. Okay. So, when you say, so this is about context, then the next box I would draw, this is deixis. Deixis will have personal, then you have spatial, and then you have temporal. Okay. So, this temporal information or personal information would include he, she, etc. Okay. Spatial would include here, there, etc. And temporal would include now, then. These are the didactic phrases, and why we would call them as didactic phrases? Primarily because they are context sensitive. So, without the just as linguistic inputs or linguistic phrases, that is not enough. So, the linguistic context is not enough to understand this didactic markers or the didactic phrases. So, we need to find out what are the other expressions associated with it, and what kind of, so what kind of expression, whether related to person, related to space, related to time. So, when the information is related to person, we have the personal pronouns as the didactic phrases. When the information is related to space, here, there, we have the spatial didactic phrases, and when we have the information related to time, now, then, last week, that would be temporal deixis, right. So, I hope it is clear. So, these are all conceptual questions or conceptual things that you might encounter as questions in the domain of pragmatics. So, that is the deixis.